Welcome to Building Stories, the podcast where we tell honest, sometimes funny stories about buildings, digital transformation, construction, and construction tech. Today, we're very excited to have Brett King with us, who works for Procore. Not just works for, he's the Director of Industry Transformation in EMEA at Procore. So very cool to have you, Brett, and excited to hear about some of your journey. Maybe just put us in the picture. How do you kind of land here? Give us a rundown of the last 20 years in 20 seconds.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks for that. Hopefully some funny stories in my background. Definitely, I've had a few. So grew up in South Africa. Once I left school, I had this bit of a journey of like, what do I choose? And it was up between graphic design, architecture. I decided the graphic design route. Ended up running my own business for a while and realizing it wasn't such a great route after all, like working super long hours. And did a pivot, like sort of after like 8 or so years, and studied. I did a mechanical engineering diploma, and I ended up working on a mine, like in their drawing office, doing like structural. It was all structural steel and stuff like that. But quite quickly decided South Africa was kind of not for me anymore. I wanted a little bit of a change in environment. My family had all moved over to the UK. And I moved to the UK thinking, well, I could do graphic design or this kind of look at a sort of engineering style role. And I landed with one of the big main contractors in the UK and really started at the bottom. So, I mean, I was like doing some document control stuff, information management. And that was my journey into...
So that's Mace, yeah? Is that going
that
through
was at
Mace?
Yeah. So 100%, yeah. Mace. Really lucky. I mean, I didn't even know who Mace was at the time, but landed this through. It was actually through a recruitment agency, just landed the role. And I was like prepared to take pretty much anything. And I think what I learned in the UK was quite quickly was what was great was like it was kind of up to you as to how you grew and like kind of what the effort you put in. I quite quickly learned like there was an easy way for me to grow, and the company acknowledged that, and I stayed there for 10 years and. So
this is kind of the 2010s to kind of 2020.
2010s,
information management and kind of quality roles, yeah?
Correct. That's correct. The roles like sort of information management, I found it really easy. I loved the data and I loved that we were kind of digitizing and getting information to the right people at the right time. But I kind of felt like that was really easy. I couldn't understand why the industry was battling with this so much. And then I looked at like the tools that people were using, but like, builders are builders. They don't want to sit behind a computer at the end of the day, and they want to be out on site. And it was like it wasn't always easy to get them in the information. But so quite quickly, I made this juncture into quality where I was like, okay, this gave me an opportunity more to get out on site and make sure people were kind of using the information we had given them. And like we were doing loads of ISO audits and things like that. But I think the challenge there was that I'd go out on site and I would have issued the drawings to the team, you know what I mean? And then I'd go out on site and then I'd see that this was like a drawing that was issued like 3 revisions ago. You're definitely building it wrong.
It's too hard to change it because it's on the hanger already and it's we can use that one. So why do we have to change it, you know?
Yeah, correct. When you see those drawings out on site, you look at them, they've got coffee stains on them and all of this kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah, but like I kind of love that about construction. I have this love-hate relationship with construction, by the way, where I'm like, there's so much potential in the construction industry. And we just fail to realize it like a lot, but it's a beautiful industry because when I've seen people like when the chips are stacked against you as a construction team, the things that we achieve are
can do.
And when we have loads of time, we're more prepared to go to the pub at like 4:00 kind of thing, you know. I kind of love that. There's definitely this love-hate relationship, but I have this passion in me to like be able to get information to people and make their lives a little bit easier. And like when I see how much data we've got, and we've just not used it properly in construction. So like the context of how we use it, we've been collecting data for years. We just literally sit on this gold mine and do nothing.
True.
Yeah, a little bit frustrating, but it changes.
That's of course. I mean, that's a favorite topic of ours, Luke and I in particular, about data. So talk to us a little bit about like what's changed over the last 4 or 5 years. Someone like you who kind of had that, I suppose, foresight or what's coming and you were already involved in it, but why is data so important? Let's just kind of take it to the very basic. We've always collected it, but why now? Like why is it way more important than it was?
I think at the moment, like, so data is key. Data is key to unlocking better project outcomes, but only if you use it in the right context. So it's becoming more important in the sense that, like, we're no longer going to be using the data reactively. We want to be a little bit more proactive, and we wanted to predict some outcomes. And like, we've got so much data that if we don't look at it at the moment, we're just going to keep on making the same mistakes. But because we've got so much, we can identify some trends, and we can start saying, okay, well, because this has happened 10 out of 10 times in the past, the likelihood of that happening is another time. So 11 out of 11. But yeah, I mean, look, I know we say in 5 years. I've seen that since I moved to the UK. So 15 years ago, we were already collecting data. I mean, we were using a tool when I was at Mace. It was Aconex, or no, it wasn't. It was actually, I saw the changes in the platform. So it was, I think when I started, it was called BRW. Then it got bought by a company called Conject, and then it got bought by Aconex. And like, iterations changed, and you could see people, they liked one version, and then you moved on to the next one, and they didn't like using it. And then some people preferred that version. But like I say, project teams they didn't really, no one wants to sit, well, a construction manager, for instance, does not want to sit behind their desk.
That's a good point. And that's a good point. And that's, we can talk about how we see the future and data and things, but in the end, these are the guys delivering the thing. So how do you talk to them in their language, or how do you kind of bridge the gap?
You've got exactly what you said there. You've got to talk to them in their language. So like, there needs to be the whole what's in it for me example. So if you're talking to like a package manager, for instance, and you send him, I want you to collect all the data, and it's going to actually take you a little bit longer to collect the data than just scribbling down on a pen and paper. But all of a sudden, if you give me that data, I'm going to be able to produce a report. Your Thursday report, your subcontractor meeting, I'm going to be able to give you a report that's all pre-populated. You're not going to have to spend 4 hours collecting all of that data from the different sources, because I can just put it in your lap. So you've solved that for that construction manager.
So you take a pain point away, make my life easier, those type of things.
Correct. But you kind of, like I said, you might be adding a pain point, because for them, picking up a pen and paper while you're out on site, they've probably got that already, you know what I mean? But like, now you're saying to them, like, I want you to take your phone out. You got to take your gloves off, or now you're going to have gloves with like one of the two fingers missing, and those are always the dorks who are out on site. You can, like, walk around.
The touch screen guys. Okay.
I always laugh whenever I would go. When I was a visitor, they would try and give me like the pink helmet. It was hard at.
It's me. Like I have all the fingers cut out. I have no fingers.
But I mean, so you're actually asking them to say, like, take out your phone. Now you got to log on to an app. You might remember or might not remember your password. And there's definitely a pain point in it. But once you show them like the benefit of, like, I'm going to save you 4 hours on the Wednesday night that you would have spent collecting all of that data. I'm going to save you that 4 hours. And then you can start showing them, because what I see too many people do is they go like the other end, and they say to them, I need this data because I need a report to the C-suite. Yes. Construction managers, like, fair enough. They want the job, so they're not going to argue with anyone in the C-suite, but that's not a driver for them to collect data.
And they might help them actually get the thing built, does it? No.
If they don't see that the data is like valuable to them, they'll just collect any old data. And you know what I mean? So like, when we say data is key and data is gold and these kind of things, it's only clean data. So like, again, we've been collecting loads and loads of data, but how valuable is that data if you've got to spend hours and hours cleaning it and things like that? That's a real challenge we have to overcome too. So.
Can you pick out any stories from your history, I guess, where the data got used well or badly? Maybe make a real story out of it.
Oh yeah, cool. I guess so. An example of like where we don't use data well. This is at my previous company. We were collecting like supply chain. We were like doing performance monitoring of them, but the requirement there was that we'd only do it at the end of the project. Now, if you've got a 4-year-long project, and this is a true example, by the way, so we had a piling contractor. 4 years later, we only did the ratings on their performance, and we were trying to do the performance ratings in a good way. We were like doing commercial, program quality, all of those kind of things. So the data, like, we were rating them on real data, but we only used that 4 years later, or it fed our procurement schedule for the next project 4 years later. Like that piling contractor, and by the way, the one that I'm talking about, they were pretty good, so it wasn't the end of the world. But like, there were examples of this time and time again where you're only rating them like too late on, and I just think that was a pretty critical example. But the data doesn't always feed back, so you're like, yes, you do this supplier rating, and you see it at the end of the project. But what do you do with that in the end? How does it feed?
It's too late. It's too late.
Schedule? Well, how does it feed into the procurement schedule when let's say, for instance, you've got a package for dry lining and you've got 3 subcontractors who are bidding for it. How do you decide which is the right one? So if you've got your client driver of like, the client wants, what's really important to them is that the project finishes on time. They don't mind, you can see they don't mind a little bit of cost overrun. Well, choose the supplier that you know is going to like kind of meet the program, and they've got a good history of meeting that program. So, and I see that's very, very disjointed in the construction industry at the moment, like the silos. We're not like getting that information or the data to feed back to like start points so that you can start projects properly.
It's either not coming back or not coming back fast enough to influence the outcome, right?
Correct. Or it's just disjointed. There's no mechanism for that information to feed back into your tender event schedule or your procurement schedule. There's just no mechanism. So my drive is definitely to like kind of push, definitely where I'm at Procore, I'm in a position where I can kind of help the product in terms of like what does the future roadmap look like for that project. So and then just kind of like tell that story, I guess.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because then, everything you've spoken about, you've been in the industry, Brett. You're obviously very passionate. You've been hands-on, right? You've seen some of these issues firsthand. So why make the switch come to the dark side? Why come to the tech side and try and influence that change? What got the blood boiling to get on this side?
There's a couple of stories here, but I'll tie them all into one quite nicely, I guess. When I was at my previous company, so ISG, it's a company that doesn't exist anymore. They were £2.5 billion main contractor in the UK. Basically went bust sort of, when was it? November last year. But while I was there, my role there was called Head of Operational Excellence. And because I had this focus on quality in my previous roles, I wanted a platform that kind of delivered quality, because I was sick and tired of the narrative of like everywhere I've worked before, we've always had a KPI of like, let's finish projects defect free. And then we go and invest in tools where we manage defects. I'm like, it kind of doesn't make sense. So by your own rights, you're saying we're going to have a load of defects. And I thought the approach was like, how do we minimize defects? Well, you've got to kind of move quality way, way up front in the program. And you do that by doing planned inspections and linking those to program. And then off of any failed inspections, that's when you raise defects. Because if you're just going to manage defects and raise 3,000 defects, you're going to issue those 3,000 defects to a subcontractor. They're going to have to close the 3,000 out, and then you're going to have to go and re-inspect them. That's 9,000 items that you're doing. So, and if you think about the productivity issues in construction, we've just created a productivity issue. So anyway, to my point, I was looking at a couple of platforms that kind of could meet the strategy, because I'm saying the strategy of going to manage defects is wrong. Let's think of a different strategy. And I couldn't find a tool that would like link it to like the program, and you could bulk plan inspections, and just nothing was really working. And we took a view. So the team that I headed up, there were 9 of us, and we reviewed 28 different tools in the market. And Procore was one of the tools that we viewed. And I was fortunate enough to, I think, have a really good account executive, and he was able to like share with me properly the roadmap. He understood the pain points that I was having, and he wasn't prepared to just sell me like a point solution. So I kind of started to see this like landscape. And yeah, I'm not going to say it was like a love affair with Procore, but I kind of saw something in them where I was like, we had at ISG, we had over 120 softwares, and they didn't talk to each other. But Procore, when I went into Procore, they had like this marketplace, and I could see they had like really open APIs. These were challenges I had with our existing platforms, where like I had to pay for API access. I had to pay for everything if I wanted to link everything in. And Procore was the one that didn't do that. So I really appreciated that from that point of view. And a role came available. And like I say, ISG could see that things weren't great at the time. And to the day, it's no joke, but I was on a 3-month notice period. I handed my resignation in. And the day that I was supposed to go hand my laptop and my phone back in, ISG closed its doors. So like a real bittersweet moment, unfortunately.
Wow.
I was obviously happy.
Wow.
I'm like trying to post on LinkedIn, that I've got this great new job where I'm going to reach more. So by the way, the reason why I joined Procore was like, I feel like had an opportunity to share my experience with more contractors and more subcontractors and kind of influence product and influence discussions with those people. But yeah, I was starting at Procore. 2,500 of my colleagues in ISG all of a sudden no longer don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, I remember. It was a sad day.
It was a sad day. But the thing that happened, like off the back of that, which amazes me, and this is where I have this love affair with construction again. The construction industry kind of mucked in, and like most of the people now have jobs again. You know what I mean? And I had like someone reporting into me. I think he was going to retire in like 3 years, and I like felt for this guy. I was like, "You're not like, how are you going to battle to find work and things like that?" That's just sadly the truth of the industry we're in. He got a job like within 2 months, and we had 130 graduates in ISG, and through members like through organizations like Build UK. They placed all 130 graduates within the month. Do you know what I mean? And that like just shows you when construction teams are up against challenges and there's this real love for each other. And the network expanded. So now all of those people are different contractors. And, but amazing. But so that's my kind of how I came to Procore.
Great story. And there's so much in there. So I just want to go back to what you just mentioned before. You were running a really large outfit. Basically, you had a lot of silo products, right? Remember the time 5-10 years ago where point solutions were really in? So everyone was just kind of getting it because it solved that tiny problem. So when you did acquire or, put Procore in your business, did you end up displacing a lot of that, silo solutions or point solutions in your business? And what was that change management process like? Because it's a good one to talk through as people like you, or you now trying to help. I suspect they're running into the same challenges. So talk to us about that.
Well, sadly, we never got to do Pro. So this is my poor account executive.
Okay.
We were close, so we would have paid. But I mean, the business was under some financial difficulty, and we had spent a load of money on platforms, and we hadn't achieved like kind of the outcome. So we had like reviewed like some return on investments, and we just didn't achieve that. So for instance, we're using products and like we were paying millions per year, and we're only using it on 18 projects. So there's no return on investment there.
And how many projects would you have been doing?
Oh, like
when you
like
say
400.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We were only using
5%. Yeah.
And the teams were just battling with the adoption of the tools. And it is sadly because we didn't like invest in the change management side of things, and like kind of there was no real clear strategy. Although I'm probably being a little bit mean. Like there was a strategy on how to roll some of the platforms out, but there wasn't like always this overarching clear strategy. Like the quality one that I'm talking about as an example. You're just getting, your strategy is actually saying to you, go and find a point solution. Whereas I'm saying like, well, the strategy should be, okay, there are times where you're going to have point solutions. I'm not going to argue that. But in general, you want like a unified platform that will help you manage your projects and things like that. So there is this combination. But if you go down a unified platform route where they promise you they can do absolutely everything, and then all of a sudden you see them starting to build things like 360 cameras where the world likes of open space and build.dots already do that, all those companies are doing is creating another problem. So I think you need this unified approach where like kind of you can manage your phases of a project. So, and you might have a little bit of a silo where in design, like if I look at Revit and Navisworks, they own that market. So 90% of work is going to be designed in Revit. Navisworks are going to be using that. How do you ingest and how can we work with Autodesk to pull all of that information in? So Procore does. We've got integrations that go with that. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question in terms of the change management. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get with IFG, but obviously change
management. You kind of answered it, yeah. Did you ever go down the route of making your own software in a house? Because that's definitely a trend that we've seen with certain tier 1 type of contractors. And what was the learning on back of that?
Oh, we were close. So I think that my main learning there was like, we looked at it and we looked at how much it would cost and things like that. And the thing is, you can build something that's absolutely fit for your needs. The problem we have is like, your supply chain work for all the different main contractors, and then they're going to use your platform only, and then on the next one they're going to use their platform. So that's a challenge you're going to have to overcome. So you're going to have to be really strict on not strict, but you're going to have to train them up on a specific way that you use it. You're going to get exactly what you want. I get that. The problem that I saw, and this is why we didn't go down this route, was you're going to end up like having to invest in the support functions and things like that, and that comes at a huge overhead cost to a business. And essentially, like any main contractors, your R&D budget is nowhere near the likes of a Procore and Autodesk or anyone like that. They've got the R&D budgets, and like I think you should rather. My approach is leverage them. They've got good implementation teams. That leverage all of that to help you with the support kind of things and become a true partner. So that was always my approach. Like, and this is again why Procore worked for me. Is like I could see there was like this partnership piece where I knew I wasn't going to get exactly what I wanted, but I could see it in the roadmap, and they were like willing to bring myself, and not just myself at ISG. They were bringing on our peers at other main contractors, and they were bringing them on because they wanted to fix the problem in construction, which is basically trying to get everyone like working, getting information to people at the right time, and using the data off the back of it. So.
Nice. And mate, your title's pretty fancy. So what does your day-to-day or a typical week look like? I know you've only been there, for a few weeks and months, but how have you found it so far? And what are you going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a fancy title, and I'm definitely not one for titles. I think anyone who meets me and says you're a director, like whatever. Like, I mean, I've heard this. Like I think you get people called like technology evangelists and things like that. Yeah. I'm not one for title, but like my day job at the end of the day is around like, yes, there's a thought leadership style. I've got good industry experience, so I've got an opinion. I'm pretty opinionated, I think, at the best of times. Happy to share that. I feel like I really know what the challenges are that project teams face. So I'd say in my role, there's essentially three things. Part of it is about staying connected to the industry. So like bringing what are the industry challenges and bringing those back to Procore so that we can kind of like the first part is like, how does that influence the product side of things? Like, how does that influence the roadmap? So that as a tech company, we know we are fixing problems that are in the actual industry. Because tech companies it can be very easy to like solve a problem that you think is a problem. If you're not listening to who you're selling to, you might not be solving their problem. The other part of my role is because my network, I think I was lucky to have quite a broad network. I was able to bring the network into Procore and like kind of help sales teams. So again, if you've never been in construction and you're trying to sell to construction people, terminology is very important and things like that. So I help the sales teams with kind of just general challenges that they have. But also I've been able to kind of introduce the sales team to some of my network. And it's just having the right conversation with the right people, kind of at the right level. Because, again, it's very easy to try and go and sell a product to, again, very pointy solution. You can go to, for instance, a BIM manager on a project. They're not the decision maker. Yes, they're an influencer, but you need to get to the level of people who are actually going to make a decision. And then, the last piece is like really about going to industry events and things like that and talking. Not so much about Procore. I'm not linked to sales or anything like that. But the thought leader piece of like, because I'm not going to just tell you that Procore
evangelist. That's what we call you.
I know it's not my favorite term, but there's great products out in the market, and idea, I'd like to try and stay on top of those. And and also I try and bridge a gap between those products where I can see there's no integration with Procore at the moment. I try and bring those partners on board and definitely try and solve a challenge together.
Awesome, mate. Great to know. Probably one last question for me is that, it feels like an interview at some of these things at one point. So if you could solve one major pain point for the industry, just one, overnight, what would that be?
I'd say, I mean, this is going to be so broad in a way, but like,
of course,
the way we communicate is critical. So like, the breakdown that I see, like if we could get that part right, the collaboration piece of like breaking down these silos, if we could just get the way of like getting your design team to talk to your construction teams, then all of a sudden all that work we do up front in design where we're building digital twins and you're trying to eliminate those challenges because they save so much money if you do them in the design space. if we could just get that talking to the construction teams and they could use BIM a little bit more, and because there's this real resistance, and I'm like, you can see it's the right solution, but just the language that like sort of the design team will talk to the construction team doesn't always work. And I think it's that communication piece. So if we could get that right, I think we'd be in a really.
And do you think it's partly to do with how different teams in the construction industry at large are incentivized? And does that create this silo and division?
Definitely. So like, I mean, if I come onto this piece, like the contract types. So I've sit on a number of like forums and have met with a number of organizations like we had contracts and they were JCT contracts, but the amendments were bigger than the contract. I mean, these are standard forms of contract, and you should, if you're looking at a contract, like, what's the point in having a contract if you're going to make a whole load of changes? Like, either the contract's fit for purpose, and I appreciate you might need to make some adjustments and things like that, but it's almost like we go into contract in dispute. So from client to main contractor to subcontractor, you're always trying to transfer that risk.
Yeah.
And if you think about like construction, if I think about like integrated project delivery, where you're trying to like break out that risk up front and you're trying to share the pain or the love, that's a much better way. But like at the moment, what we do is a main contractor. So from an ISG point of view, we love change because we're only making 4% on this project if we're lucky. If there's a little bit of change, now we start changing the scope of how much money those projects can make. So yeah, again, down to communication. If we can kind of communicate, like if the main contractor could go to the client and say to them, I'm going to make 10% on this project, but there's no change. We need to get the design done all up front and that's done and dusted. I just think we'll be in a much better space in the industry in general. There's a lot of money there for everyone.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great point. Listen, I had a job somewhat similar to yours in a previous life. And as someone from industry, you could always identify what the product needed to do, right? And you could kind of come up with really great ideas on the thing needs to look like this and do this. But then the reality of a software business is that does not happen overnight. So give us a peek behind the curtain. How does that work in Procore when you come with a good idea from industry and land it in the dev team? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'm not going to lie. So 4 months in, there are people who are listening, but it's a big moving beast. You know what I mean? Like change can't just happen because there's so many parts of the product that kind of are interdependent on other parts and things like that. And you need to make a decision. And with a company like Procore, where like huge presence in the US, massive strength there, the way we build in the US is not the exact same way you build in the UK and Europe. And there's nuances in like what we need. Now, what I've seen is like our US product teams, they're all based out there, but they're constantly backwards and forwards here, and they are listening to what we're saying. And they know that there's a requirement or a change. So like there's legislative requirements around like Building Safety Act and things like that, and ISO 19650 and the way you manage documents. And they've invested heavily in those products. Now, you can invest heavily in a product. That doesn't mean you can flick it on overnight and a month later you've got the product. It takes time to do that.
It does.
And if you're gonna invest in it, you need to do like beta testing and all of those kind of things. And sadly, for our clients that are in Europe, they want it now.
Of course.
And you can't give it to them now. So there's this balance of like being really open with like what does a roadmap look like. But coming from industry, I would never buy a product on their roadmap because I always know they will promise you something's going to come in 6 months and maybe going to be 2 years if you're lucky. Yes, but it is important to see that roadmap piece. But it's a challenge. I mean, like, look, I'm based in the UK. We do a little bit of work in the US. What I want is not necessarily what the US wants, but there is a good understanding. Like we're moving in the same direction, and we're having the conversations, which is great.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah, it's 2025. We probably always have to mention AI. What do you see as being some of the perhaps big things that are coming? You know, what are you excited about for 2025?
AI. I know we have to talk about AI. Don't get me wrong. And it's valid, but like my intention, and I guess this is the same with tech in general in construction. It should just support the way we work.
Help me get something done.
I'd like it to almost be like invisible. invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Tech should almost be invisible. You're just doing something without thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like you're picking up your phone and you're sending a WhatsApp message. If the WhatsApp message can populate things in Procore and vice versa, that's where you want to be. People just don't realize they're even using the tech. And if I'm honest, AI is the exact same. So like where AI is positive is where it's like, you've kind of used it and it's been baked in the solution. You didn't even know it was there. And it's like giving you a little bit of a prompt of like, hey, have you thought about this? And have you thought about if you did this, this would happen? So this is where I see like agentic AI and all of those kind of things. Like it's going to get smarter. So AI gets smarter and smarter, but it will still be here to support. And I've had a number of conversations with people where we talk about AI and like people are scared that AI is going to replace you. And the reality is AI is not going to replace you, but someone using AI will. But there's just levels of like kind of education with AI. So I think we need to educate people on how to use it efficiently and things like that. Because if, again, as a construction manager, you're not going to go find them with a paid subscription for ChatGPT trying to do their job better. How do you bake that in the tool that they're using on the day? So, and whatever that might be, if they're typing up minutes on a Word document or if they're trying to do that on an app, how do you bake AI into those solutions so that it starts to pull this information from sources?
Yeah, perfect. Oh, listen, mate, that's been really great. Really great to hear about your background, what you're doing now at Procore. Sounds really exciting. So really appreciate you coming on. How do people find you, Brett? If they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely. Reach out on LinkedIn. So Brett.King. You'll find me there, and please do. And I don't know, I can share something on Procore web address or something like that. I'll be around at a number of events. So definitely based in the UK at the moment, but doing a lot of travel around Europe too. We're expanding into Europe. So I'll be at a number of industry events, but yeah, the presence on LinkedIn is growing. That was my challenge when I moved to Procore. I was like, nice. I was on LinkedIn, but never ever posted anything like that.
Duck your game, eh?
Okay.
Rick is a LinkedIn expert, so that's good.
Luke's taken over. We had this internal competition, so that's great. We're gonna add you, and we obviously, we'll start to engage. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, super. And I've obviously in prep, I listened to a couple of the podcasts. I love these kind of things. I love the realness of these kind of conversations. And if I'm honest, that's what construction love. It's the language that they speak. They have a little bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke and take the piss out of each other. It's just the way. And that's the other part I wanted to say earlier. Like construction, what I learned is that like it's a kind of noble. Like if you do a solid favor for someone in construction, they feel like they owe you. And then it's kind of this cyclical thing. And like, before you know it, those people are sitting in high up positions. And this is where I tap them up at the moment. I'm like, hey man, you remember what I did for you? When you now need to buy Procore.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's great. Awesome. It's been super.
Awesome. All right, mate. Thank you so much. And people will find you around the events around Europe in the coming year.